and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Tuesday, 29 July. I'm your host Daniel, and today we're going to talk about the Cambodia and Thailand ceasefire agreement and Trump's statements on a 10 to 12 day deadline for Putin. So firstly, Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire starting at midnight on July the 28th. Following deadly clashes that left 35 people dead and 200,000 displaced. The ceasefire was announced by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who mediated the talks in his capacity as the chair of ASEAN. The conflict, rooted in a long-standing border dispute, escalated in recent months after the deaths and injuries of soldiers from both countries, with fighting intensifying to include airstrikes and missile attacks. Diplomatic ties were strained further when both nations recalled ambassadors and Thailand shut their border with Cambodia. Efforts to resolve the conflict gained momentum with mediation offers from China and the US, including a direct warning from US President Donald Trump that trade agreements could be risked if the violence continued. So what? So firstly, I just wanted to cover off what I talked about in my post last night, that it seems highly likely that both sides in the conflict were seeking an off-ramp that would allow them to save face, claim victory in their domestic audiences, and end the conflict pretty quickly. Additionally, while the current border location is disputed, Cambodia was almost certainly outmatched militarily and was in no position to push Thailand out of the disputed regions. In a similar manner, it seemed highly unlikely that Thailand was willing to take more land from Cambodia, as this would just lead to further international condemnation. So there's some more flow-on effects from this. Cambodia, through all the imagery and fighting that I saw, seemed clearly outmatched by Thailand. Thailand soldiers were very well equipped. They had modern artillery, modern fighting vehicles, tanks, etc., and a large air force, whereas Cambodia, most imagery we saw of Cambodian fighters were in no t-shirts, in the bush, using outdated small arms and pretty old MLRS to fire towards the Thailand side. The flow-on effect from this is now Cambodia knows it's in a position where it can't defeat Thailand militarily, and it also can't defend itself if Thailand was to decide to take more land from Cambodia. So it seems possible that we'll see them look towards an ally like China to provide them with updated small arms, modern military vehicles, and possibly even moving towards an air force. This will likely cause more tension in the region, as China won't give it to them for nothing and will likely look for some kind of diplomatic support in Southeast Asia, especially within like ASEAN, as part of this agreement to help build their military to a more modern fighting force. So yeah, there's definitely going to be some flow-on effects now that this conflict is over. It's also possible we'll see a lot more militarization of the Thai-Cambodian border, and it will take some time until it gets back to its previous state where tourism could easily flow through there, which will have flow-on effects for the local communities in the region, as I covered in my YouTube video. It could lead to like poverty for these already pretty impoverished villages along the border regions. So yeah, while the current conflict is over, this is far from finished and something we'll continue to keep an eye on. And lastly, US President Donald Trump said on Monday that he'll set a new deadline of 10 to 12 days for Russian President Vladimir Putin to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. In a statement after meeting Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he said, "I'm disappointed in President Putin. I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. We just don't see any progress being made." So what? On the surface, this is a super positive statement, and one that likely came following conversations with Keir Starmer. However, Trump has said a lot of things in the past, so it's one of the kind of, let's just wait and see what he actually does before we start celebrating this change in kind of pace. It's possible that this is just more talk from the president and that he'll just change his mind the next time he talks to someone who's a bit more pro-Russian, and will just flip on this again. However, if he does bring these threats to 10 to 12 days, that's going to put some pretty significant pressure on Russia, who has not achieved anywhere near their goals, even the ones they laid out recently, to how they wanted to gain more ground over the next, I think, during that 50-day period that Trump had kind of offered at the start, which could lead to some pretty interesting dynamics when it comes to the sale of Russian oil. As one of the big things that Trump has threatened to do is put secondary tariffs on whoever buys Russian oil, being in like large importers of India. That's kind of the key one. This money then finances the Russian war effort and is kind of the only real way they're making money still. So if these sanctions were to come in and threaten India, it's quite possible they would stop buying Russian oil, which could lead to further losses in the Russian economy, which would have devastating effects on their ability to continue the war and possibly bring them to the negotiating table for good, for an actual legitimate conversation for once. But yeah, that's been your Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you again tomorrow.